Is California about to kill its own golden goose in a desperate last-ditch hunt for cash?
That's the billion-dollar question, or in this case, $100 billion question.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are tearing apart the proposal for the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act in California. That's Initiative 2500024.
And it is a big one. It's a plan to levy a colossal one-time 5% excise tax on the net worth of anyone or any trust that's over $1 billion.
And this isn't just, shuffling taxes around. Critics are calling this an unprecedented attempt at wealth confiscation.
Right. And it's happening in a state that is, frankly, fiscally dependent on its highest earners. Now, proponents, they're projecting a massive influx, $100 billion
Wow.
from this single levy. And they're framing it as, the necessary cure for California's budget problems. They've got about a $30 billion annual shortfall coming up.
But the size of it is only half the story. Critics argue that calling it one time sets a really dangerous precedent. We're looking at sources that warned this could lead to fiscal ruin. So our mission today is to really unpack that promise of a quick $100 billion fix versus, the long-term threat to California's entire tax base.
Yeah, and when you look at how wealth taxes have failed around the world, this plan starts to look less like responsible governing and more like a really high-risk gamble.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the goal. The initiative is clearly targeting an immediate crisis.
It is. And the money is specifically earmarked. The sources say 90% goes to Medi-Cal for health care, and the other 10% goes to K through 12 education.
That sounds responsible on paper, but where's the catch? What's the fatal flaw that critics are pointing to?
Well, the fatal flaw, at least according to the opposition, it all comes down to one little phrase.
Right.
One time.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the whole ballgame. It's absolutely crucial to understanding the whole conservative critique here. Opponents are just deeply skeptical.
Because of California's history with these things.
Exactly. They cite the state's track record where, temporary taxes like sales tax hikes in the past, they just have a way of sticking around, becoming permanent.
And once that precedent is set, it's hard to unring that bell. What's the worry about it expanding?
The concern is that once they prove the mechanism works and that $100 billion is spent, the political pressure will be immense to just do it again.
And push the threshold lower.
Push the threshold lower. It won't stop at billionaires. Critics feel that, eventually this could hit people worth $100 million or $10 million, especially in a state with such high property values.
So if the goal is to fix the general budget shortfall, why is this $100 billion being put in a special fund? That seems like a really important detail.
It's vital. The money goes into a restricted fund. That means it provides zero new revenue for the state's general fund.
And the general fund pays for what exactly?
That's the flexible pot of money. It pays for all the core state services. We're talking law enforcement, state parks, higher education, prisons, all the basics.
So if high earners leave because of this tax, the general fund loses their income tax money.
Forever.
But it doesn't get any of this $100 billion windfall to plug the hole.
That's it, exactly. It actually makes the state's structural deficit worse. A structural deficit is when your regular spending is just higher than your regular income year after year. This plan attacks the income side, making that gap even bigger down the road.
And we really can't overstate how much the state depends on that income. The sources call California's tax system incredibly top-heavy. How reliant are they?
It's just staggering. The top 1% of taxpayers paid over 40% of all personal income taxes. And in a boom year, like 2021, that number was actually over 50%.
Over half.
Over half. So this concentration means if just a handful of these billionaires decide to pack up and leave, California instantly creates a permanent multi-billion-dollar hole in its budget. You're biting the hand that feeds all your essential services.
Let's switch gears to implementation. This thing feels like an administrative and legal nightmare just waiting to happen. What are the challenges for the Franchise Tax Board, the FTB?
The administrative side alone suggests it's, kind of set up to fail. The initiative only gives the FTB $15 million a year.
15. 1-5.
1-5. $15 million for administration, collection, compliance. Now, you compare that. The FTB itself previously estimated they'd need $200 to $300 million a year just to administer a smaller wealth tax that was proposed before.
That gap is just, it's astonishing. How can they possibly verify the wealth of billionaires whose finances are, notoriously complex with less than 10% of the money they said they'd need?
Right. And the complexity is where all that cost comes from. The tax applies to all forms of personal property and wealth, whether tangible or intangible.
So everything.
Everything. Private businesses, which are a huge component of wealth, hard to value assets like a minority stake in some pre-IPO tech startup, or intellectual property or art collections.
How does the FTB even begin to value something like that? They can't just look up a stock price.
They can't. And this is where wealth taxes globally just fall apart. They struggle with valuing these non-financial assets. We're talking about almost 40% of the wealth of the top 1%.
Wow.
So the FTB would have to hire armies of expert appraisers, accountants, lawyers, people who do this for a living, and they've only got $15 million to do it. It's just not serious.
And then the legal problems just pile on top of that. There's this Hotel California anti-flight mechanism.
Right.
The tax is levied in 2026, but it applies retroactively to anyone who was a resident way back on January 1st, 2025. What does that mean legally?
It means constitutional challenges are, well, they're certain, and they'll be immediate.
Right.
Taxing assets you acquired before a tax was even proposed, that's a pretty clear violation of due process protections. You can't just change the rules of the game after it's already started.
What about people who already left? Say someone moves to Texas in March 2025. Can California still come after them a year later?
That is going to be the core legal battle. The state is trying to claim a legal connection or nexus to people even after they formally left. But taxing a non-resident who has clearly broken ties with the state, that's going to be extremely difficult to defend in a U.S. constitutional court.
So this whole structure, critics argue, basically just incentivizes people to leave, which is where we get the phrase, killing the golden goose.
Exactly. The core risk is the permanent loss of that continuous income tax revenue. And it's not just the tax returns. These people fund local charities, they invest in local companies, they generate a ton of business activity. When they leave, all of that goes with them.
You had a really good analogy for this, the state budget as an engine.
Yeah, think of the budget as a high-performance engine. It needs premium fuel to run, and that's the income tax from high earners. This wealth tax is like a huge one-time shot of nitrous oxide. $100 billion.
A big temporary boost.
A huge boost. The engine runs great for 1 year, but the fear is that this action just permanently damages the fuel lines. The supply of that premium fuel is gone forever. So after that one great year, the engine is just prone to breaking down constantly.
And that breakdown isn't just cutting services, right? It has other consequences.
Oh, absolutely. That fiscal loss leads to pressure for more broad-based taxes. So the burden shifts right onto the middle class and small businesses. Or you get severe cuts to those essential services we talked about.
And other states are watching this?
They're rolling out the welcome mat. States like Nevada, Texas, they're actively advertising their lack of personal or corporate income tax. They're using California's proposal as a competitive advantage.
So critics worry this will just scare away future innovators, future billionaires, the people who would have started the next Silicon Valley.
It erodes California's reputation as a hub for innovation. I mean, analyses of wealth taxes worldwide suggest they lead to long-run GDP declines. We're talking 2 to 5%. And job losses. Because capital is mobile, it goes where it's treated best.
Now, this 5% tax is being called a first-in-the-world tax. But what does the global track record of other wealth taxes tell us?
The global record is just a massive warning sign. It's probably the most powerful argument against this. Back in 1990, 12 developed countries had wealth taxes. By 2017, that was down to 5. By 2019, almost every European country that had one had gotten rid of it.
And they didn't get rid of them because they were working so well, I'm guessing.
Not at all. They were eliminated because of high administrative costs, endless problems with valuation, and most importantly, massive capital flight that just made the whole exercise pointless.
Which countries are we talking about?
Major economies. Germany, Denmark, Finland, Sweden. They all discontinued their wealth taxes.
And then there's France. The number there is staggering. Their wealth tax is said to have cost the country over $125 billion in capital flight.
Since 1998, yeah, $125 billion. That's a monumental policy failure. And that wasn't just cash leaving the country. It was wealth creators, entrepreneurs, job drivers, all moving their assets and their tax residency somewhere else.
So global experience shows these taxes almost never raise the money they project.
Right, because that capital flight. And when you compare that history to California's proposed $15 million administration budget, I mean, that wouldn't even cover the legal bills for fighting a few of these billionaires for 1 year. It seems almost comical.
Proponents are banking on that retroactive clause to stop people from leaving immediately. But what's the counterargument?
The critique is that it only delays the inevitable. If you successfully impose a wealth tax once, you're just signaling to every high net worth individual in the world that you're willing to do it again.
Right.
So it actually reinforces the incentive to get out and get out permanently before the next one-time tax gets proposed. That's why so many opponents see this as just a slush fund for special interests, not a real fix.
So we've looked at the proposal, the massive revenue projection, the constitutional hurdles, and the history of failure around the world. The core conservative argument really seems to be, is a one-time confiscation, as they call it, worth the risk of gutting your long-term tax base?
And that connects to the bigger picture. It raises the most important question for California, according to these sources. Is the state's real problem a lack of revenue? Or is it a lack of financial discipline?
Meaning?
The data shows California gets massive revenue surpluses in good years, but instead of saving it, they rapidly increase spending obligations. So opponents argue the solution isn't some high-risk, unprecedented tax, it's reining in the spending.
A final provocative thought for you to consider. If the state does this, if they successfully impose this one-time tax and that $100 billion is spent, where does the legislature look next? What happens when that annual budget deficit, now even bigger because of capital flight's even harder?
Well, they start taxing the assets of millionaires next, pushing that wealth level lower and lower into the population.
That is the real permanent risk California is taking by setting this precedent.